Okay, I'm on page 71. Due diligence checklist after contract accepted. Oh, you got a question? Go ahead.
Yes, Ron. On the LOIs, I noticed on there that you had a date that it was written up at the top, and then you have a contract date on it. And the contract date is usually 10, 12 days later.
Yeah, all I'm saying is I'll have the contract to you within a few days.
What if they take several days to get the LOI signed? That
means nothing. It's the trigger starts when the LOI is signed. In fact, you might even notice that I don't even have that clause over here on the ones we wrote up.
Actually, you have a contract date of usually about 12 days away. Yeah, on some of them.
Yeah, it don't matter. That's not an important part of your LOI.
Okay, thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, is your policy not to assume any of these loans? Just to take it subject to, and if they won't take it subject to?
I would rather do a land contract to them where the entity signs on the land contract than assume it. If you're asking me, would I ever personally assume one of these loans, the answer is only if. That's the only way I could do it, and if the deal was a kick-butt deal. And then you're going to make your own decision. You guys have forgotten already, when I trained you in the single-family house business, I said, don't go down and personally guarantee a note to buy a house. If you're going to guarantee stuff, wait till you get into deals that are worth risking your credit for. Are some of these deals worth risking your credit for? Yeah. Some of these deals are worth risking your life for. I mean, besides, what's the worst could happen? You lose your credit. You lose your house. Houses, houses are free. That ain't no big deal. Just go get another one. It's the worst, isn't it? Nobody's going to kill you, I hope, unless you get into one of them Kentucky coal mines and when you get up there, you don't want to ever get off by yourself. We got to get on to this due diligence thing because it is very important stuff here. And along the way, we're going to talk about some of the things you've got to get professionals to do after you get the contract accepted. So note this says after contract accepted. Properties with buildings and mobile home parks. That's a different due diligence than raw land. Order title. You guys should all know that by now. Immediately order the title. Do not accept a title search presented to you by the seller. Order your own title search. All you do is either deposit the contract with your attorney or with your title company and tell them to get a title search ordered. Then they do a title search and they print out the title thing. Now here's a big, 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 big no-no. Do not let the title company hand you the title search and expect you to look at this thing and have a clue what it says. This is why you have an attorney. You have the title company send the title search to an attorney, your attorney. You're not to read. I don't want you to even read the title search. Besides, if you've ever read one, it's a real hard job just to stay awake long enough to get through it. It bores me to tears. I'd rather read one of them Donald Trump books than read a title search. Okay, collect all the financial information on the property. And this sometimes is a pain in the neck. Granted. Especially if it's what kind of property, the kind we want, the kind that's a mess. It's probably not hard for you to understand that you're not going to get very good financial information on a property that's 40% occupied. I mean, if the management sucks so bad that it's 40% occupied, the accounting probably sucks just as bad. And it could be that the bank owns the property and they can only get the information if they got it from the seller, and sellers who are being foreclosed on aren't that cooperative. Sometimes you can't get the facts. And when you get the facts, sometimes you don't get all the facts or you don't trust them. You just got to go with common sense and maybe professional help, perhaps. You got an apartment complex. It's not hard for you to figure out what it should be renting for, is it? How do you do that? By comps. What's the ones around it renting for? Find out what they're renting for. if they're comparable units, and make sure they're comparable units. Don't go to a Class A apartment building and compare it to your Class C apartment building. Make sure that you're comparing Class C to Class C. And I know you know, what's a Class A, what's a Class C? You'll know. Class A is where you want to live. Class C is where you wonder why people live there. And if you don't know, the broker you're working with, the professionals you're working with do know. Get me some comps on a comparable project, or 2 or 3. You know, I want to know what's going on in the area. And those are the numbers I'll use for my unit. I'll plug those in for the rent. And really all I care about is an average rent. I mean, 300 units. Like, I'm going to sit here, go down 300 lines. Let's see, 3 bedroom, 2 bedroom, 1 bedroom, I want to know what the average rent is for this unit times the number of units. Boom, done. Now, how do you get to an average? Let's see. Some higher, some lower. But when you add them all up, you got the same number. Macro, not micro. So how much do I think it'll rent for? And just for the record, I'm going to shave some off because of the Murphy factor. And then you plug in a vacancy factor. Then you take all the expenses that you can accumulate and you stick them on your sheet, if in fact they are for a whole year. So, well, you got to watch that. Sometimes you get a financial statement that's for a part of a year. Don't forget, you're plugging in a whole year here. And then you just do the best you can to come up with an NOI that makes sense. And do you be conservative or liberal? Conservative. Now, if this project consumes your life and you have to make it work, the tendency is to do what? Yeah, make up numbers and come at this thing from la-la land. Especially if you're trying to sell this project to somebody, a partner or whoever, or a lender or whoever. Remember, you cannot make a turkey into an eagle by making up numbers. So you go back to this pro forma thing, and you fill it in the best you can with the information that you got. And then if you're smart, you get a professional manager or a professional commercial broker to look it over and say, did I miss something here? Do these numbers make sense to you? And you come to a conclusion about what this property will or will not do. So now you've done your financial homework. Anytime you can get tax returns on the property, you absolutely should get them. You should request them every time. But is it reasonable to get them every time? No. Because you've got distressed properties, sometimes bank-owned. You're not going to get it. Well, you may get a tax return if they're bank-owned, but only if the bank got it from the individual before they filed foreclosure on them. Now, you thinkerbrains will spend 90 days just making sure that every single number on that thing is correct. Won't you? Most of the time, okay. A, just for the record, it ain't correct. Something's wrong. So what? Shouldn't kill the deal. Because you're not going to pay retail price. Therefore, you don't have to make every single number perfect, do you? Mortgage information. If you're taking over a mortgage, it probably would be best you know what kind of mortgage you're taking over and what the terms of it are, wouldn't you think? Now, the good news is that's a matter of public record. Worst case, the title company can pull that up and copy it for you. So you can always get the mortgage information. And, of course, the copies of the rents and the leases. Now, this is something that you really have to force yourself to get. You must know what units are occupied now and what they're paying. In other words, now we're working on reality actuals. So you'll know how much cash flow you got to work with or without. You must know if there's been special concessions made to these tenants that are going to come back and bite you in the butt after you buy. You must know if they're on month-to-month or if they're on leases. You must know if they're HUD or non-HUD. You have to know this stuff. And you know what? If there's no other way to get it, what should someone do? Go knocking door to door till you get this information. This is something you should have before you close on this property. And frankly, it's the seller's responsibility to get it to you, and it's rare when they won't. If a bank's foreclosed on this property, he's had somebody go over there and take control of it and get this information and collect rents from these people, and they know the numbers and they know the facts. So I don't want you to think that it's going to be that hard to get this stuff, because usually it isn't. When people put a property on the market, they know any prudent buyer is going to want this same stuff. So most of them go to work to collect it before you even come along. Visit the property if you haven't done so. Who thinks it's a good idea to buy a property you've never even seen? Now, I've done this several times just within the last few months. I meet the property manager on site. I pick their brain every which way but Sunday. I want to know everything they know that's bad about this project. I want to meet the maintenance people, because they'll tell you the truth. They could care less one way or the other. They'll tell you where the bodies are buried. They'll tell you what it needs, because they haven't been able to get it from the management now. Man, if I could just get a little bit of money, I could get these things fixed and I could get them rented. It makes me sick. These apartments are sitting here like this, but I can't do anything. My hands are tied. This is where you win friends. Well, if you had the money to work with, and that wasn't an obstacle, how fast could you get these things turned around and get them in good shape so we can put tenants in here? Would you feel better working on a project where the money was actually there to take care of these complaints so these people aren't bitching at you all day and every day? Oh, God, yes, please buy this project. Okay, well, then I'll need your help. I want to know everything you know, and I want to know the truth. And by the way, when I buy this project, you do intend to stay and be the maintenance person, don't you? Yeah. By the way, does that mean you hiring them? Well, maybe not. Why not? I mean, if they already know the project, if you like them. I absolutely insist on going into the worst units in the project. Worst units. Show me the worst ones you got. And then show me a couple of the good ones. I mean, how many units can you go into before you've had enough anyway? I will never go into more than 4 or 5 units in an apartment project. So this is where I get to throw a number at whatever the renovation is. And you know what? Let's say you got a 300-unit apartment project. Will your renovation number be correct? No. But it'll be within $1 million. That's close enough. Should I get professional help to give me a ballpark number on renovating this thing before I closed on it? Yes. Certainly. Absolutely. At the very least, I could go have somebody take a look at one of those buildings and multiply it times however many buildings there are, couldn't I? And make sure that how long does it take to get a paving company to come out and tell me what it would cost to pave the driveway? It's a phone call. 4 or 5 days later, you got an estimate. How long does it take to get an HVAC company to come out and say, listen, I want to do this whole building. Give me a ballpark. You don't have to nail it down to the pennies right now. Don't spend 2 weeks. Give me this number. Let's just take one building and I'll multiply it. It doesn't take long to get these numbers. And then you got a much more educated guess. Now, you guys know how much it costs to paint and patch walls and all that crap inside. Most of you in this room are perfectly capable of figuring out what it takes to renovate the inside of that apartment. You know what kitchens cost. And you know what bathrooms cost. And that's easy stuff. Anyway, just do a little bit of homework. Take a lot of photos. Oh, and definitely talk to the tenants. Just talk to whoever's there. Hey, I'm looking at buying this project. What keeps you awake at night? What would you like to see changed? Would you live here if this project were turned around and we made it a nice place to live? How do you feel about this project? You feel safe here. You learn a lot. And incidentally, here's a good one. When you're talking to the tenants, make sure the management is not with you. Do not let the management be there. When you're talking to the maintenance people, do not let the management be standing there for fear of reprisals. See if it looks like the income and expense figures that you've been given make any sense based on what you see when you get to the property. One of the things you want to ask the property manager is, what are the rents? What is the occupancy? Who knows better? Are these rents in your mind low, or do you think they should be raised? Get a feel. By the way, how much stock should you put in what a property management tells you about what should be? So. That's like asking a CPA how to get rich. While you're there, you ask yourself, what am I going to do to make this project more valuable other than just fix it? Look around. Does this place need a security fence? Does it need a security gate? Does it need landscaping? And would it be a totally different looking property if we had some nice looking trees and shrubs in here? Do we need to change the entrance on this thing to make it easier to get in and out? What are people bitching about? Do we need to fill in the pool and plant flowers where it's at? What would that do to our income expenses? Because guess what? Pools are liability. They're not an asset. If they want to go swimming, go to the ocean. I hate projects with pools. Not only are they a liability, people drown in them, but they're a real big expense to maintain. And they'll either pretty or they're ugly. As far as I'm concerned, there ought to be something there besides water. I'm looking for ways to increase the income. I'm looking for ways to raise the rents. I'm looking for ways to reduce the expenses. I'm looking for ways to make it a more attractive place for people to want to come and live. I'm looking for ways to make it easy to sell to tenants. Is there a building that I could put a laundromat in, perhaps? Is there a place to put vending machines to where they can, tenants love that. Is there things that I could add to this property that they could buy to increase my revenue? Can I, instead of furnishing appliances, rent them appliances in addition to their rent? Just look around. Use common sense. And take somebody with you to get ideas. And ask the property manager the same questions. What could we do to this place? What could you and I do to this place to really make it a classy place to live that people want to live? And what do you people bitch about the most? And what do we need to fix? If I assigned you the responsibility of turning this project around, what would you do? You'll be surprised at the answers they will give you. And how excited you're going to make them because they finally see a way to get out of having their hands tied. If the deal looks good, you better get it to a lender. Because if you don't get it to a lender, your due diligence period will run out and you won't have any clue on where you're going to get the money from. You want to get it to a lender as early in the process as possible. And you can still finish your due diligence after the lender has started getting you the loan. And the MAI appraisal, we're going to come back to that because you've got to make a decision there. It's a catch-22. Order an environmental inspection. There's no reason to wait. If your title is clear and it looks like it's a go after you visited the project, go ahead and get the phase 1 ordered because sometimes it takes 30 days just to get those. Order a wood destroying organism report to see if you got termites. Folks, when you got buildings, you might have termites, so you better get checked for termites. And make darn sure that your environmental people check it for asbestos and lead-based paint, if applicable. That's what you have these people check for. Your phase 1 person will either do it or know who will do it for you. Never buy an apartment complex without getting a check for those items. If it's a go, you've done all this due diligence. You're several weeks later now. And now you know it's a go, and you're ready to release your due diligence. In order to release your due diligence, you should send written notice to the seller that I'm releasing the due diligence. My deposit is now hard, which is more slang. It means it is non-refundable from this point on. Your attorney should send that letter, not you. Your attorney, who has already got your contract in his possession, who's already checked your title report, who's already checked your phase 1 report, who's already checked your environmental reports. Your attorney who's cleared all these reports and cleared the fact that you don't have any problems with any municipalities. Your attorney then writes the letter to the sellers that the due diligence period is over and we accept the project. And then, by the way, what if you find stuff? Now you go back and renegotiate the deal or kill the deal. Incidentally, if you find lead-based paint, now the seller knows it's got lead-based paint. Now, they're not required to tell the buyer, but if the seller knows it's got lead-based paint and don't disclose it on commercial property, can they possibly be held liable in the future and be part of lawsuits? Absolutely. So now they know, they know it's got lead-based paint or mold or whatever. Okay, vacant land. Oh, that's a little different process. In fact, that's a lot different process. In fact, darn near everything we just said is irrelevant. You still order title search, don't you? Yep. You still visit the property. You got to see what grass looks like. You may want to take an engineer with you if you haven't already sent them out there, because the engineer will tell you what can and cannot take place on that vacant land. They know. They're from the area. I'd make sure they're from the area if it was me. And I had my attorney find that engineer. And I'd want an engineer that's got the inside track to the city, one that knows what's going on in the area, probably one who's influential in the area, one who can get things done and cut through the crap because the city loves them and they're not fighting with them all the time. One who can work quickly to get the job done. And you won't have any trouble finding. Guess who the attorneys and the brokers want to work with? The ones who can work quickly and get the job done. You know, if they're a pain in the ass to us, they're a pain in the ass to them, and they're not going to use it. You should visit the property and find out what's going on around it. Is it really in the path of progress? Is there a Walmart right down the street? Is this thing located correctly, or is it out in the middle of nowhere? Am I going to be able to do what I anticipated doing with this property based on what I'm seeing around me? Engineers should have a say-so in that. Commercial brokers should be part of that. Maybe you guys go to lunch together one day and take a ride and pick their brain. This is where you listen more than you talk. Now you get a lender involved immediately and order, and it's not as appraisal, but an appraisal. Typo. Better change it because the book will be invalid if you don't fix that typo. Besides, when you sell it on eBay, you want it right. You better not. All right. Now you go ahead and hire the engineer. You haven't hired him up to now. Now you hire the engineer. By the way, do you think they want you to pay him $20,000 up front? No. Many of them will do it for free, knowing you're going to bring them in the business. Worst case, they want a little upfront money. $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, which frankly they deserve. They're doing all the work. They're checking out all the problems. They're checking with the city. They're going down to the zoning department. And they're drawing a map of what you think it will be. They're determining its best use. They're doing what they do best. And frankly, if they want money, give it to them. And where do they make the money? Why will they work for peanuts up front? Because they're going to be in the back end where they make their big money at, in the development process where they make their big money. And even if you're not the one doing the development, somebody's got to do this stuff for the people that are doing the building on it, and they know that. You know, your job to tell them, look, I want you to find all the hidden traps here. I want you to work with my attorney, and you guys tell me what kind of a mess I'd make. Tell me if I'm going to get into a problem here. And I put attorney and engineer together. And I say, sick 'em, guys. Come back and tell me what is. Now, if a deal looks like a go from that point, then you can order the phase one, or you can take a chance and have already ordered the phase one. If you order the phase one, do you have to pay for the phase one when they deliver the phase one? Do you get that money back if you don't buy the property? No. Cost of doing business. And I'm telling you guys, a phase one is going to cost you a minimum of $2,500 and a maximum of $5,000, $6,000, and that's phase one. Now, if they find anything, you got to go to phase two, and that's going to get thousands. But of course, if they find anything, you got a different deal, don't you? I'm coming to that phase one stuff. If it's a go, make sure your attorney notifies the seller or agent you have released a contingency, so your deposit will now go hard. And make sure you feel like should you release the due diligence if you have no clue where the money's going to come from? I have pulled back a couple here recently simply because the due diligence period expired and I wasn't sure it was going to get funded. I'm not risking the deposit. And I will tell you, you bring me deals. And if the due diligence is not over when the due diligence period expires, we got two choices. We can extend the due diligence as we just did on the one in Michigan, or I'm pulling out. And if I pull out, I'm pulling out. And I really don't care who you are. I don't care what the deal is. I don't care how bad it hurts your feelings. I'm not leaving $50,000, $100,000, $150,000 sitting out there at my risk, hoping everything's going to work out okay. Incidentally, how do you think I learned that? Now, have your attorney send you the closing documents to examine. Now we see we're a couple days before closing now. You got the loan lined up. You got a lender to say yes. You got a commitment letter, which we went through yesterday. Now we're getting ready to close. You never want to go to closing without seeing what you're going to sign before you get there. You want to see the HUD one, which is 50% wrong. 50 is wrong 50% of the time. And then you want to see the note and the mortgage that's involved in this, if there is one. And if you're borrowing private money or any money, there is. You want to see what you're going to sign. It's actually the normal thing to do. And guess what? You don't have to go to closing. That's a terminology. You don't have to go anywhere. They'll send you the package to sign. Or you can go to the office and sign it, and the seller comes in later. It's rare in the commercial world where seller and the buyer ever meet each other at any one room anywhere. Rare. In fact, I've never closed on a commercial property where I've met. In fact, I don't think I've ever met the seller. Is that a pretty important checklist?
Ron, I got a question.
Yeah.
Isn't it to your advantage, or why do you notify the seller that your deposit is hard? Isn't it to your advantage to leave it to wait the 30, 60 days due diligence versus, I'm a little confused in there. Why you notify the seller?
Your contract says you got 60 days due diligence. You can back out anytime you want. If you don't notify the seller some contracts say if you don't notify them, your money's hard anyway. But it's the only right professional thing to do to go ahead and acknowledge that you agree to buy the property. Because you just lost your deposit anyway, whether you notify them or not.
I think you're saying why wait?
You'll find it a lot easier to do business with people when there's a communication link. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen lose fortunes because they just don't know how to communicate, or they're too damn lazy to notify people around them of what's going on. It's a common everyday thing. So it's just communications. Now, why do I wait the entire 60 days? I usually don't release the due diligence till right the day I have to. Because there really is no reason to release it early. And frankly, there ain't no seller on the planet that I've ever met expects you to release it early. Now, that doesn't mean I have to wait till the last minute to close. Take the project in Florida, for example. David and Nathan, do you happen to be in here? Well, just for the record, how long do we have to close that property?
May 25th.
Okay, it ain't gonna take till May 25th, if I can help it. Because I know who's going to lend the money, and the due diligence is almost done. Why sit around and wait? You know that every day that goes by is a day that you risk losing the deal? I mean, what if the seller dies? Of course, in this case, it's kind of hard to kill a mattress company, but, Yeah, what if they went bankrupt? What if? What if the building burns down? If that happens, I wanted to do it when I own it. What if another hurricane comes through? By God, I want to own it if that happens. You bet. Okay, appraisals. Now, Mr. Steve Belding up here pointed out to me, who happens to be an appraisal, that I was a little bit in error here. Looks like my information is a little out of date. However, there are several types of appraisals. And folks, you better understand this. In the world of commercial, you can have non-MAI appraisers appraise property all day long. But very few lenders I know of will accept them. So you wasted your money and the time. In fact, we had that situation right here on this Dallas property. Rock hired an appraisal. He didn't know that, you see. And we got these appraisals, and only later to realize to have a lender point out to us they weren't MAI. And frankly, I forgot to check it. And I forgot to tell him. And so they were worthless. They wouldn't look at them. So we went and got them done again with an MAI appraisal. MAI stands for Made as Instructed. Oh, no, it don't. It stands for the member of the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers. And MAI is a process that an appraiser has to go through to get to the certification where they can use the words MAI after their name. In fact, Steve, why don't you take the microphone, Steve, and tell us what you got to do to be an MAI. You got to go to school, but you also got to do a lot of appraisals.
Basically, it's just a process of education and experience both, and it's a member of the Appraisal Institute. Both the American Institute of Real Estate Appraisers and the Society of Real Estate Appraisers merged together more than 10 years ago. So those were the two main trade associations of appraisers. They're now merged together as the Appraisal Institute, headquartered out of Chicago. A lot of hoops, a lot of hurdles to become an MAI.
Now, aren't you guys better now that you know that these two associations merged? Yes? Okay. How long does it take one to become an MAI?
Anywhere from 5 to 10 years, depending upon when somebody does a demonstration appraisal report, which is normally the stop point, because you don't get paid to do that. You got to spend time and effort on your own to get that done.
So, in other words, the reason lenders trust MAIs is because they already know they have a bunch of experience. They had to go through this rigmarole, and they had to be tested. So, in other words, they're at the top of their craft.
That's correct.
All right. Well, what's the difference between an MAI and a SREA or whatever?
At this point, there is no more SREA designation. That was the Society of Real Estate Appraisers' top designation.
Okay.
A senior real estate analyst is what that was. There is no more of those. There's only the MAI for commercial industrial designation and the SRA for residential appraisals.
So there's an MAI and an SRA only.
Correct. And those both are awarded by the Appraisal Institute.
So an SRA is residential, so they're really not qualified to appraise commercial property.
That's correct. That's true.
Okay. And that's why nobody's going to trust their appraisal. Even though, frankly, you don't take that much training to do comps and compare comps and yada, 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 and form your opinion. It really doesn't matter what we feel, how we feel anyway. It matters how the lenders feel. And the truth is, they want an MAI. And you guys just make a note. Do not order an appraisal on commercial property that's not MAI.
On top of that, what you need to know probably is, depending upon the lender may have their very own approved list of MAI. So even if you get an MAI that's not on the approved list, that may not work for that lender.
Exactly, and that's why we need to discuss what's on page 74. Thank you, sir.
You bet.
Here's your catch-22. You get a contract on a property. You're doing your due diligence, one of which is what? Getting an appraisal. May I suggest to you, you do not buy a commercial property without getting an MAI appraisal, even if you don't need a lender? It's cheap insurance, guys. It's cheap. Now, MAI appraisal is not a $300 deal. I mean, it's more like a $3,000 deal, if you're lucky. And easily can cost you more. In fact, it goes from what to what, Steve? $2,500 to $10,000? Yeah, and up. Okay, depending on the complicated property they are appraising. I tell you what, I've seen some properties that I sure wouldn't want to be assigned the task of appraising. Incidentally, what is an appraisal? It's an opinion of value based on one man or woman's research. That's why you hear so much doubt in the minds of lenders as to the validity of those appraisals. That property we have on Forney, I can't tell you how many times the lenders they doubted the value. They doubted the value because they didn't take the time to do the research in this area. All they saw was 37 acres of land on a suburb of Dallas, and they just couldn't see how it was worth $12.2 million. Well, by looking at a report, here's the comps. Some of the comps were a pretty good distance away, though. I'll give them that, because there weren't any close comps. Well, now there are. There are now for sure. And even though there are now for sure, most of them just couldn't get over the fact that land is worth what it's worth, because they just didn't trust the appraisal. Turns out, reality is it is worth it. Your problem is this. Do you order an appraisal immediately after you check the title, or do you sit around and wait until you're ready to take this thing to a lender and let them order the appraisal? Well, you see the problem. If I order an MAI appraisal, now what if my lender won't accept that MAI appraisal? Turn right around and order another one. Or if I let them order it, now I got to go through 2, 3, 4 weeks of my due diligence process here before I even sick the lender on ordering the appraisal, and God knows how long that's going to take. I could run out of due diligence before I get the appraisal back. Besides, the first thing I want to know is the value. I want to know the value quickly to see if I'm still in the game or not. Because if I get tripped up by the appraisal, I've done all this other stuff for nothing. So one of the first things I want is an appraisal. Now here's the only way to fix that problem, and that is to know where the money's coming from immediately. And now you just either have the lender order it immediately, or at least get a list of the lender's appraisers so you can order it from one of them. Because if that MAI appraisal is not on that lender's list, they may want one of their own. Now, fortunately, the good news is, if it is an MAI appraisal, many lenders will just have their appraiser review that appraisal, which saves an awful lot of time and a lot of money as well. So what's the easiest thing for you to do when it comes time to order an appraisal?
Get their list.
Get the lender's list, or what? It's even better than that.
Know where you get the money from.
No, have the lender order the appraisal. Now, of course, this is all assuming you got a lender, isn't it? Okay, well, that's great. If you're getting private money and you know where it's coming from, that's great. Okay, but that's not always the case, is it? It certainly hasn't been the case with me up until recently. Well, when I get this hard money thing fixed, I won't be ordering the appraisal anymore. I'll just call up Brandon, or I'll call up the lender, and I say, hey, here's the property, get the appraisal ordered, and guess what they're going to say? Send money. Yeah, send money. They're not ordering that appraisal and risking that they're paying for it. Because when you get an appraisal ordered, you got to pay for it, don't you? Whether you buy the property or not. And again, you're talking about thousands of dollars here, guys. Now, to me, in the past, I've just been getting the appraisal order immediately. It's one of the very first things I do after I know the title's clear. I'll risk that I have to pay for 2 appraisals. To me, it's an insignificant amount of money compared to the value of these multi-million-dollar deals. And so far, I don't think I've had to, nor I don't think I will, because most of the lenders will accept those MAIs. It's a lot easier to get a private lender to accept the MAI than it is an institutional lender. The line of credit we're doing here, it just so happens that the appraiser that we used was on their list. Every once in a while you get lucky. So they didn't even have to order another one. In fact, they didn't even have to review this one. But I'll tell you what we are doing right now. We're getting the appraiser to assign that appraisal to the bank. And that they will want. They're going to want the Phase 1 assigned to them. And, of course, they're going to want title insurance in their name. Frankly, those items are the only items stopping us from closing next week, which they should be done by now. Any questions on that?
Hard money lenders have quick sale valuations.
Hard money lenders almost always request quick sale valuations from their appraiser. And here's their thinking, as they should be thinking. If we make this loan, and we put this property on the market, what's the value, assuming that it takes no more than 90 days to sell it? So it's a reduced value, which is okay. With the, you know what, I'll tell you, if anything is going to kill your loan, it's going to be the lender's estimation of the market value. And it is very common for private lenders to come back and say it's worth less than what your appraiser says it's worth. This is another reason why I want you to be very conservative when preparing your offers as to how much you think you can borrow on the property and not try to push it to the max all the time. If you think you can borrow 50% on a piece of land, you're assuming that the lender is going to agree with your appraiser's evaluation of the land. If the lender comes in and knocks the value down, now you're borrowing 50% of their value. So if you promise the seller 50%, you're short on cash. There goes your deal. So you always want to get that loan down low. This piece of land here pays for $12.2 million. There's no way. I didn't apply for $6 million. Intentionally, I didn't apply for $6 million. Because for one thing, it says in the appraisal that it's going to cost $800,000 to bring in fill dirt to fill it in. Well, see, I can see that. So, I've said this to 2 or 3 different lenders. Well, tell you what, just take the $800,000 off the value. You're down to 11. Are you still okay? Yeah. Yeah, but, yeah. I had a guy send me a proposal for a $3.2 million loan on that same property. He wouldn't even make that. He started giving me this story. I got to fill in the land, and, I'm not sure. This ain't the loan for you, man. I'm sure glad he didn't take it. I'm sure glad he decided to back out of it. Because I got more, a lot cheaper. God bless him. By the way, I told him to send my $5,000 fee back. All right. Toxic liability. Woo. This one can get nasty. What is that anyway? This is where you can get your clock clean if you're not careful. This is a book that a student sent me just before I left. I can't imagine any human being ever reading this. But this is all about toxic waste and stuff. And things that are under the ground, in other words. And if you want to take a look at this, you can. And if you want to get this company's name, because they do phase ones nationwide. I better give you their number, I guess. Personally, I don't have any trouble finding people that do phase ones locally. Every city's got them. But this company is called ATC Associates, Inc. And they're located in Lombard, Illinois. And their telephone number is 630-916-7272. And their website address is atc-enviro.com. ENVIRO. This is a student in one of my class, happens to be in this business. And he makes a pretty good case. They do all kinds of environmental inspections and cleanup. And, they do. ATC has one of the highest rated insurance packages in the engineering and environmental consulting industry, with professional liability insurance coverage of $10 million, claims made with an aggregate limit of $20 million. So it's certainly worth getting their information. Look at here. He made this book out to Global Publishing. Wasn't that nice of him? I imagine there's some really good, cool stuff in here. I'd really much rather you read this thing than me, because I ain't never reading that thing. But I want you guys to take time to read this letter by another Phase 1 specialist that's in your book on page 77. She wrote me this letter the other day. I want you to read it. We're going to together do a course on Phase 1 environmental problems. She's going to do most of it, of course. And then she, too, is a nationwide service. Some nasty stuff in it. Doesn't matter how she takes title. No matter what she does, The land is screwed, and she can't do anything with it. Now, what if she's got a debt on it? You never know what's underneath the top of that soil. You're not smart enough to figure it out on your own. I don't care where this land is at. I don't care if it's out in the middle of the woods. A Phase 1 report is an absolute necessity before you close on commercial property. It's the cost of doing business. It's just as important as buying insurance on a house when you buy it. Because it's really simple. If you buy that property and then it's discovered that you have environmental problems, they're your problems. You see, you don't get to say, but I didn't put that stuff under there. The government don't care. They will come after you, your property, and everybody in the chain of title as far as they can go back till they get that poison fixed. And it is not cheap to fix, as you can see in here. See, once they find this crap, you got the EPA involved now. And it is very expensive to do anything when the EPA is involved. And you don't get to go hire a contractor and and beat them up and do it on the cheap. And you don't have any choice. If you've got a mortgage on this property and this is discovered, not only are you involved, the lender's involved, and all the previous owners involved. And just for the record, is this not a case to why you should never take title to property in your own name?
Yeah.
Not even for a minute? Not even for a minute. If you take title for 10 minutes, you're just as guilty as if you had title for 10 years. You're in the chain of title. If you're not ever in the chain of title in your name, then nobody's ever coming after you personally for anything environmentally. I can tell you horror stories. In fact, I think Dale probably told one last night, didn't he, about this guy that sold a property 10 years earlier and now getting sued for environmental poison because he was in the chain of title back then. Question?
Just a comment. I wanted to reiterate that anybody that's ever been on title in that chain of title has a liability on these kind of properties. One other thing that you might want to be aware of also, Ron, I used to work for Chevron Land and Development Company. We had a lot of issues with contaminated soils. We moved a million cubic feet of dirt for one remediation project. That's a lot of money. The other thing is that if you are buying raw land, one other thing that you might want to be aware of is that there could be little critters also. That could have impact on what you are getting into. You may have an endangered species. It could be a little snail or whatever that may impact your ability to use that land the way you intended. So be aware of that.
Who checks for that?
Sorry?
Who checks for that? The critter getters? Huh? Who do you send out to check for that? Because you're right. You're absolutely right.
Well, there's another thing that you need to check with on raw land, and that is the Army Corps of Engineer will give you some kind of an idea of whether there's wetlands involved that you need to be aware of.
Yeah.
I would say that as far as in critters and that kind of thing, you probably ought to check with your state. They have a Department of Environmental Quality or something of that nature in most states that deal with the toxic issues as well as probably some of the critter issues.
Well, who would discover this species if nobody even checked it out?
A lot of times, the ones that I would think that it seems like recollecting back, the environmental Phase 1 environmental usually should pick that up as well.
They check for species?
They should be aware of that. Yeah, they should be aware of those issues. But you can also check with your state government, your
it's
Department
big
of
time.
Environmental
In
Quality.
Florida, it's a big issue. Yeah. Personally, I don't know. I'd have to look real hard at having the critters come up missing on the weekend. I don't know, but I know they. they put you in jail for that kind of stuff. So I don't
Hey,
think I
Ron.
like that idea too much.
To answer your question on who may point out some critters on properties, we were looking to develop an apartment complex, and some local neighbors that are animal rights and into the environment actually brought that issue out at one of the town meetings, and it was a lot of problem for us, and ultimately helped to make the decision we couldn't move forward on the apartment.
On the apartments?
On the apartments,
you mean
yeah,
building
because
apartments?
We were doing a development, and there was some species of endangered bat on the back side of the apartment on the land we were going to develop.
Okay.
Ron, when you hire your engineer, your civil engineer,
Yep.
part of your checklist should be for them to tell you what are some of these issues that you might face, and for them to recommend the sub-consultants to deal with it.
Very good. Yeah, sure. I just never thought tell them to check for endangered species. I should have, and I'm hoping. Oh no, boy! These things are on there. I want to know it. Absolutely want to know it. It certainly can kill your project. How'd you like to buy a piece of land that you intend to develop and can't develop it now? Okay, do I need to say any more about Phase 1 toxic reports?
Got a question. In Atlanta, there's a story of an elderly couple that has a property, and they had leased it to another entity or whatever, some people, and unbeknownst to them, the people that they had leased it to had some barrels on the property that had leaked into the ground.
Yep.
The EPA came in and cleaned it up and now have put a lien of several $1 million on their property, and now they're at risk of losing it.
Yep.
So if we acquire a commercial property and lease it out to somebody, how do we protect ourselves or prevent ourselves from getting in that situation?
Don't lease it to somebody with chemicals, I guess. But that's also why they have liability insurance. And there's only so much you can do, guys. This is not a perfect world. And the more you're aware of, the more you're aware to protect yourself against them. And certainly you wouldn't want to put a tenant in a property that's even remotely capable of poisoning the ground without getting a huge insurance policy to cover yourself against. Remember, if the ground gets poisoned, the earth doesn't come to the end. That just means somebody's got to pay to clean it up. And that's going to be expensive. Yes, sir.
As far as leasing, most of your standard commercial leases do have a clause in it regarding contamination or, use of that kind of thing. However, like you say, you can't control everything. Obviously, you want to know who you're dealing with and what they're involved in.
Yeah.
One other thing that when you're dealing with raw land, there's, again, back to the engineers, the civil engineers, and they should be able to help you through this thing. But a lot of times nowadays, they require traffic studies, mitigation studies, whether there's a traffic signal or, how big the streets or wide the streets need to be.
Yep.
There's just a lot of stuff that your engineers, especially if they're local, should be aware of.
That's exactly right. And that's exactly why I want local engineers on the job, too.
If I may, just a real quick story about endangered species, that land that I bought yesterday. I asked the realtor what could go wrong building on this. When you apply for a building permit, they have to check for red caterpillars. If they find a red caterpillar, they draw a 9-foot circle around it, and you can never build within that 9-foot circle. So I said, well, what do you do about that? He said, well, 6 months before they check, release green caterpillars. They eat the red ones.
So, what eats bats? All right, let's move on, can we? On page 79. You're buying a building that comes with rents and rent credits. The general consensus is that the best time to close it is on the 5th of the month. Now, if you think about it, common sense would probably tell you this, because you see, when you buy an apartment complex, the landlord's got to give you credit for all the rent they collected for that month, don't they? Yeah, they do. Plus, they have to give you the deposits. If you close on the 30th, how much rent have they collected? little or none. Now you got to go collect the rent immediately. If you close on the 5th, they've collected most of the rent. And now they just got to turn it over to you. And it gives you the whole month to get it up on the records before you, and contact the tenants and all that before you have to collect the next batch, or most of it. Not all of it's going to be paid by the 5th, of course. But even more importantly, the landlord has to bring all that rent to closing, giving you credit for it, which could be a lot of money on an apartment complex. For example, I've got a little example in here. You got a 200-unit complex. And the average rent's $800 a month, and it's 90% have paid there by the 5th. That's 180 units that have given the landlord $800. That's $144,000. The landlord, the closing agent, is going to take off of the cash you're required to bring to closing. Simply because you closed on the 5th. Now, that has nothing to do with your loan, incidentally. The lender's not going to take that money away from you or anything. That is your money. So even if you had the full amount at the closing table, you literally are going to get cut a check for that $144,000. Also, same thing applies to other prorations, such as taxes. Oh, let me make another note here before we move to that. Look at the bottom, page 79. When you're buying an apartment complex, the common thing is if you close on the 5th, then they prorate the rents, and the landlord gets 5 days and you get the 25 days. Well, that's common. That's ordinary. So what? All you got to do is put it in the contract that the rent credit to buyer will begin from the first day of the month if closed by the 10th. That means you get the whole month, not 25 days. It's just a bonus. I mean, it's not a deal maker or breaker, is it? But it's free money by putting a little few words in the contract. And you think a landlord's going to bitch about that? And selling a multi-million-dollar property, and whether they give you credit for 25 days or 30 days, it's not worth arguing over. But it's worth getting. Proration taxes. If there's an escrow account, I don't really want prorations, because that means I got to bring money to closing to buy their escrow account. If there's an escrow account, I want to take over the escrow account with the property. And all that is in the contract, you mark out the prorations for taxes and insurance, and you put a little note on, just like you do with houses, buyer to receive the escrow account. The prorations don't apply. Buyer to receive the escrow account at closing. So you don't have to come with a check, so they don't get a rebate for what they've already put in the escrow account. However, you're buying a property, and prorations do apply, as they always will if you're paying cash for it or going and getting a new loan for it. It's a beautiful thing when you're buying a property that has a $200,000 worth of annual taxes, and you're closing at the end of that tax term somewhere near it, and they have to bring all that money to closing, or actually they don't bring it to closing. They reduce the amount the seller is getting by the amount of taxes the seller owes you, because you'll get the tax bill for the full amount, but you'll get that later. You want money now or money later? You get the money now. You get the money at closing. So by being aware of these things, at least you'll know, and it'll help you figure out how much cash has got to go to closing if you factor in the prorations and the rent credits. And don't forget those deposits. Oh, those deposits are beautiful. You get a 200-unit apartment complex, and, they'll say they got a $500 deposit from each unit. How much is that? Well, it's a lot of money. It's money they have to turn over to you. Now, do you intend to give those deposits back? How many of you ever rented an apartment? Okay, how many of you ever got your deposit back? 2 or 3 of you. That means you actually moved out, left it clean, and gave plenty of notice and complied with the lease, huh? Yeah, you're special. You're special. Deposits in an apartment complex is just another form of income, because very few people comply with the agreement that they signed to get their deposit back. So when you receive this $100,000 worth of deposit, that sure don't mean that's $100,000 you owe out later. You'll owe some of it out later. But it's definitely $100,000 you got to take off the cash that you got to bring to closing. Any questions on anything we covered so far today?
Just want to reconfirm something you covered, but I just want to reconfirm it. If you're doing land in another state, in another city, you advise us to get a local attorney, and if you want to get, let's say you're lending, I'm thinking of an example, your land's out west, your lender's back east where you live, okay?
Yeah.
Now, you can ask that lender back east to get the MAI person for the appraisal?
We usually order the MAI from a local MAI appraiser.
Who'll be the point person to find that MAI in the local area? The attorney or who? You don't know anybody there at that
You
point.
live somewhere else and the project's in that area.
Correct.
You could have your attorney order the MAI. You could have the engineer order the MAI.
But you don't know anybody yet, so who's the start point? The attorney?
What?
If you know nobody yet. You don't have the engineer, you don't have the attorney.
You shouldn't be buying a property in an area where there's nobody in that area working with you.
Well, let's say you're going to go find one, is the point. You get a recommendation. The first easiest is to get the attorney.
Find me a commercial broker to work with me on it.
Okay.
Somebody's got to be in that area. The last thing you want. Why do you think that I will not partner with people and give them 50% when they're not the ones doing the work on the back end?
No, I understand.
Same thing, though. It's the same thing, though.
So you
because
start
somebody
point
else has got to do the work.
So either could be your real estate broker that you're going to locate in that area, or it could be the attorney you're going to locate in that area. And they would then pinpoint
Or
the
both.
other two.
Yes, one will lead you to the others. You get a commercial broker in any city, and he'll give you a list of the people that will do the entire job for you, or she. This is what they do all day, every day. They have their click. Yes.
Yeah, two things I didn't see mentioned were estoppel letters and reviewing current leases.
For estoppel letters for tenants?
Yes.
Well, that's something that you will have before closing if you can get it. You can't always get it, but that's up to the attorney that I'm assigning to the case to get all that other junk. There's a whole bunch of junk that he's going to want to get, but frankly, none of it's going to stop me from buying the property. I don't need an estoppel letter with tenants. Try to get tenants. Well, you want an estoppel letter from the owner, aren't you? Estoppel letters where the tenant is signing something that they agree that this is what I'm paying for the rent and there's no side deals. Go try to get 200 tenants to sign anything. Yes.
I have apartments. I've had them for about 35 years in Northern Virginia, and I just want to bring up one thing that I got the wrong impression from what was just said here. When you start talking about tenants' deposits, they're not your money. They're escrowed to you. You have fiduciary responsibility. And in the state of Virginia, you have a certain amount of time to give that back. If you don't give it back within that time, if you have to give 3 times as much back, and there is no defense from a landlord's point of view if he didn't return it or send a letter. I think in 35 years with about 1,000 units, I have no knowledge in mind that we have not paid every security deposit, and we've never had an action against it. But this is critical just to keep a good name for a landlord. If you've got somebody's money and you're only a fiduciary, that's all you are. It's not your money.
Aren't you assuming, of course, that the tenant lived up to their responsibility just to where they do the deposit?
Well, as a general rule, I find that most tenants do live up to that. There's probably about a small percentage that
you must be a good manager then.
I hope I am. Thank you.
As a general rule, I find they don't live up to it. They either move out and they suck up some of it with rent, or they leave the place that's got to be repaired, all of which, of course, justifies you not giving them their deposit back. Obviously. Do I have to tell you if they are due their deposit back, you have to give it to them? I hope not. And he's right. In almost any state that I know of, if you don't give them their deposit back, you've got to send them notice why you're not giving it back and comply with the local landlord-tenant laws, which are different in not only in every county every state, but practically every county. And of course you wouldn't own an apartment complex unless the persons are in charge of that complex are completely up on those laws. This is why I don't want you guys managing your own apartment units. You hire professionals to do that. In fact, we discussed that the first day. You shouldn't be doing it. Because A, it's a lousy use of your time, but B, you're not up on those laws. There's a whole lot more we can get into on what you shouldn't do running an apartment complex. And, but I'm not going to do that here. I mean, we could be talking about discrimination laws. We could be talking about what not to say on the telephone. In fact, we could spend 4 days on this. But I'd rather just spend 1 minute and say, get professional management and let them do what they do. We just save 4 days. Yes?
Ron, is there any different due diligence if you're doing apartment to condo conversions, and is that a viable thing to do?
It's going on all over the country as fast as they can go. It's one of the hottest things out there right now.
Is there any?
And yes, there is, of course, due diligence to that effect.
Any different due diligence?
Yes, obviously. You have to find out for sure that there's a chance you're going to get this thing converted to condos, that the city's going to approve it happen. This is what your attorneys do for you. Mm-hmm. They check out not only the feasibility of it, but they get approval for doing so. And if you're not going to buy this project unless it's converted to a condo, you don't want to close on it until you get that in writing from the city and clear with all of the agencies applicable that it can be converted. And that's just part of the package. It's what you got to do prior to then. As I said yesterday, when I buy a project, I buy it assuming that it can't be converted and move forward. Because it's either usually a hotel or apartments.
Thank you.
So will this work as an apartment project if I pay this price for it? If the answer is no, I'm likely not to buy it. And that's a good point, actually. If the answer is no, and the only thing I can do is convert it to condos, there's no way I'm closing on it until I'm cleared all the way across the board. And if the seller doesn't like that, they can keep their project. But on the other hand, because we got several of these in the works right now, what if I close on it and it's a hotel and it's a viable deal as a hotel? Well, see, then I'm asking myself, well, how can I lose? Well, I can lose because they don't approve it for a condo conversion. Well, okay, then we'll just operate as a hotel. Sell it off as a hotel. Fix what's broke, get the cash flow up, and worst case, we operate a hotel till we die. We don't operate it. We operate in hotels? Now, what are we doing? We's landlords. We rent to people who operate hotels. We lease it to a hotel company. We don't operate hotels. We could operate a hotel if you wanted to. Couldn't you? You might as well get you a restaurant or two while you're at it. And maybe a gas station. Which there ain't nothing wrong with any of that if you've got somebody else in there running them for you, is there?
Another question, Ron.
Yeah.
What is the real estate commission that commercial real estate brokers charge?
Boy, I don't know. Anywhere from 5 to 10%. Where's the commercial brokers in here? It's all across the board? You know any higher than 10%, Sherman?
It's all across the board, and what you're seeing a lot lately is the buyers paying the commission to the broker rather than the seller paying. Like land, 10 years ago, land commissions were like 10%. Now they're down to about 3%, and the buyer's paying. Just depends on how hot the market is.
True, I guess.
Yeah, it also depends on how much the property is. That's usually a big determining factor. If it's $10 million,
yeah,
it's going to be much less.
Bigger the number, the lower percentage.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, makes sense. It's all negotiable, though, isn't it, guys? Everything is.
I had just another thought, Ron, as just a comment on raw land. When you have on item number 4 on, I think it's page 72, where you have the civil engineer check things out, be sure to have a real big thing is utilities, whether the property is serviceable by utilities, how far they are away, how big the pipe sizes are for your intended use. They can check all that stuff.
And also easements that are already in existence that would prevent you from building on top of them.
Absolutely.
Because quite often you have to move them or build around them. But again, who's responsible for getting all this stuff? Engineers. Not you. You don't even know how to spell easement. You don't care. Yes, ma'am.
Every LOI that you have in your book...
Pardon me? LOI, yeah.
You have in the name of your entities. Is it ever possible from the LOI being in one entity to change the LOI entity. I'm sorry, the entity for the contract, the actual contract.
I almost never close under the name that I make the offer under. You notice, you see Heritage Financial Group, Inc., right? Yeah. That sexy name? Sexy. I think it's sexy. You will find no property in the name of Heritage Financial Group, Inc. I use that because it sounds like it's an important financial institution. Because we got to use something, don't we? In reality, this is in here. I'm getting to this, how to take title. But in reality, all the properties I close in are an individual LLC. But the LLC doesn't exist till we close or shortly before. And any contract I sign is going to be assignable because I said so. And sometimes when we go to contract, we usually say Heritage Financial Group, Inc. or assigns. Remember, I'm putting up a great big deposit. It ain't like this don't create doubt in the mind of the seller like it does in single family houses when you're buying from banks and they see the word and or assigns. What do they think? You're tying up their property to try to go find a buyer for it? Well, here I'm putting up a $100,000 deposit. This is a non-issue. And in the world of commercial, people understand that people take titles to properties and entities. It's rare you'll find a big, huge commercial property in somebody's name. This is a different world.